WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange over at the Ecuadorian embassy. Surveillance, they believed, included copying data from cell phones, computers, and other devices. Welcome to the show, Richard Roth.
Thank you for having me.
So I just wanted to let people know. So this is from the Spanish newspaper El País, I guess is how you say it.
País.
But I think that their headline is wrong. It says the Spanish company and the CIA found guilty of violating rights of Julian Assange's visitors. Now they weren't found guilty yet, right? What happened is
You're right. It's El País, and they're obviously whoever translated from English to Spanish did a poor job. There was no finding by the CIA that the CIA was found guilty.
okay.
That being said, it was a pretty remarkable event that the CIA's motion to dismiss the case was denied to give us a open season to learn exactly what happened here.
So tell us what is going on. So when journalists would go and visit Julian Assange at the Ecuadorian embassy, they would give their computer and their laptops and their cell phones. They would give it to who?
So there were two things going on. The first thing is they would give it to security. So they couldn't go into the embassy. They were right outside. They couldn't go into the conference room with Julian unless they gave them their laptops or cell phones, any electronic equipment. That's the first thing that was going on. The second thing that was going on, which was unbeknownst to both Julian and the individuals that came to see him, was that they were actually recording the meetings, and there was a camera in the room, a hidden camera. So they gave it to security at the embassy. And what we learned through the Spanish litigation, and this is not speculation, we have tremendous evidence to this effect, is that the CIA entered into an agreement with a company called UC Global, a Spanish company, whereby the Spanish company would, when they worked at the embassy, so when you gave them your laptop, and you went into the meeting, they would go ahead and they would image everything on your computers, everything on your laptop, everything on your phone, and turn it over to Langley and the CIA, unbeknownst to anyone. And so not only is it a violation of the Fourth Amendment, because the federal government can't just image everything that you have without a search warrant, but as monstrous is the fact that, think about it, lawyers went in to see Julian. Now, lawyers that went in, some of our plaintiffs, had attorney-client communications in their laptops. Forget about with Julian, with other clients. Margaret Kunstler and Deborah Urbeck went in, dropped off their laptop, and their laptop had all kinds of other clientele information that the CIA is not privy to. It's even worse. Doctors that went in to visit Julian for his medical condition had information on their own computers regarding other patients. So the CIA literally received all the information in those laptops and phones and essentially went through them, which is a gross violation of the Fourth Amendment right to privacy. You need a search warrant if you're a U.S. citizen, no matter where you are in the world. And that's why we brought suit.
Now, the irony here, well, first of all, is that Julian Assange is supposedly in prison and facing prosecution for illegally obtaining information from the government. And here the government is illegally obtaining information from Julian Assange's associates, correct?
You hit the nail on the head. This is exactly right. It's the ultimate irony. The government wants to put Julian in jail for doing what it is doing, what Mike Pompeo directed it to, which is so outrageous because, first of all, the evidence, they have to prove Julian was involved in the taking. To my knowledge, he was a recipient. And last time I checked, the New York Times, CNN, Fox News, when they receive information, they print it. But more egregious is the fact that the government actually did take the information. Unlike Julian, they went in and took it. And we have, in the Spanish proceeding, we have affidavits from people at UC Global that essentially said that they got the information, they turned it over to the CIA and Langley. So it's pretty outrageous, and it is very ironic that the government is going after Julian Assange for something that it was more egregious at doing than he was.
So here, Glenn Greenwald tweeted this out. He said the original El País expose led to a criminal investigation in Spain. It determined that UC Global spied on American journalists meeting with Assange, passing it all to the CIA. It included my visit with Assange, along with my husband, David Miranda, then a Brazilian congressman. And here is a video of that. So this is from a secret camera. And so there you go. That's from a secret camera that the CIA had implanted in the embassy, Ecuadorian embassy, to spy on Julian Assange and whoever came to visit him. So they were completely spying on everybody, and they're doing it illegally, taking people's personal private electronic devices, scanning them. Now, why would UC Global do this kind of dirty work for the CIA? Is it, you think they were being paid to do this, or what's the theory?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, not only did they have cameras, but they had microphones. They could see and hear what you were saying when you were in there without you knowing it. But the answer is money. I mean, UC Global, there was we have a lot of very specific facts. UC Global was in Las Vegas. They were at a convention, and they met with individuals of the CIA. And there was a contract signed. We personally do not have it. We'll get it for title of discovery, which essentially paid UC Global significant amounts of money to give this information to the CIA. That's the only reason why they did it, was for money. So you can imagine how people are up in arms and how outrageous it is that you were sitting there, for example, just meeting with Assange, assuming that it was a confidential meeting. And yet, whatever you said and whatever he said was turned over to Langley in Virginia. So it's really shocks the conscience that the federal government's go so far. And let's add to that the fact that Mike Pompeo, as we describe in the complaint, when he gave his very first speech as a CIA director, he said, and it's actually quoted in the decision by the court, that he wanted to bring down Julian Assange. And in fact, in the decision, the court quotes from that and says that, as we allege, says that it was Mike Pompeo's goal to bring Julian Assange down, which is, we don't know why, but it's pretty outrageous that he would make that his mission.
Well, Mike Pompeo is an errand boy for the global oligarchy and the establishment, and especially the military-industrial complex in the United States. And so Julian Assange exposes their lies, and so that's why he would want to take them down. In fact, Mike Pompeo, I'm pretty sure, had a plan to kill Julian Assange, assassinate him, which, again, that's using American tax dollars to commit a murder, an assassination on a journalist. And they tell me all the time that Donald Trump is the guy who's the enemy of the press. And I guess he was doing that under Donald Trump's administration, but that's not why they say that Donald Trump's an enemy of the press. They say he's an enemy of the journalism because he was rude to what's that guy's name? Jim Acosta at press conferences.
Right.
So, but meanwhile, behind the scenes, the head of the CIA is plotting to murder and assassinate the most decorated journalists of my generation. That's for sure. And so that's another irony here. And that, to me, that's why Mike Pompeo would want to do that.
Well, let's add to that irony, Jim. Let's add to that irony the fact that one could argue the only reason why Donald Trump got elected was because of the WikiLeaks leaks that came out on the eve of the election. Let's not forget, in 2016, two things happened. One, they found this information from Anthony Weiner's wife's computer, which came out that Comer was bringing front and center. But as important, all these emails came out from the Democratic convention, how Hillary wanted to quash Bernie Sanders, and all that was to Trump's benefit. So it was a very close election. One could argue that WikiLeaks put him in office, and this is what he's doing. And by the way, on the quote, it's in the decision of the court. It's on page 24. The judge says that we had alleged that Pompeo, quote, pledged that his office would embark upon a long-term campaign against WikiLeaks. It just, and as you said, there's been reports that he wanted to assassinate, or the CIA wanted to assassinate Julian Assange. That is just, that is so far from our democracy and our institution that it shocks the conscience.
So tell me exactly what the big victory was. So now you launched a lawsuit. You want to sue CIA and Pompeo. Now the CIA said you can't sue us because we're the CIA. Is that what happened?
In part, they had many arguments. They had one, you can't sue us, we're the CIA. Two, they said that you had no reasonable expectation of privacy. So one of their arguments was that when you went into the room with, I think you said your partner, your husband, whoever, you had no reasonable expectation of privacy, so you have no lawsuit. They said that there's Supreme Court precedent that says that they had the right to do what they were doing. They claim we didn't allege the facts properly. They had several different theories upon which the federal court judge should dismiss the case. And the judge, after all the papers were submitted, and after a very heated oral argument, the judge was definitely hard on both sides, particularly the CIA, came down with his decision last week saying, no, CIA, if you engage in this conduct, you're not immune. They're entitled to look into this, and they're entitled to see why the CIA, our federal government, would be stealing information of citizens without a search warrant. So the judge gave us a green light to go in and learn what's happening. And you can bet your bippy we're going to depose Mike Pompeo. We're going to find out about this. We're going to try to find out about this alleged assassination attempt. I mean, all this stuff should be something that you report on, and it's the deeper we dig, the more upsetting the information is.
So what's basically happening now, so the judge said that this lawsuit, this trial can proceed. And what the next step in this process is called discovery. And so that's a big deal, right? So tell people what's going to happen during discovery.
It's a huge deal. Because let's not forget, in the Spanish proceeding, there were subpoenas served on the U.S. government and on Pompeo, and they were essentially all ignored. So the Spaniards don't have the information a lot of the information we want. They have a good deal. They don't have everything. There's no way the CIA can ignore a order of a federal court judge, a U.S. federal court judge. This guy was appointed by Bill Clinton, so he's been on the bench a very long time. He's very seasoned. So what we're going to do is we're going to serve document requests. We're going to serve subpoenas. We're going to serve interrogatories. We want answers to the questions about what exactly the CIA did, and the CIA is going to have to respond to those inquiries. And it's going to be there will probably be tens of thousands of documents, nothing we haven't done before. We will cull through them all, and we will find out from the beginning when he made the speech to when they met in Las Vegas, to maybe an alleged assassination attempt, which we've heard reports of. We don't know the truth of it, to the monitoring that went on, to it going back to CIA, and then the CIA possessing. And one more thing that's just outrageous is think about it. The federal government is essentially trying to put Julian Assange in jail for violating the Espionage Act. That same federal government has taped conversations of Julian's meeting with his lawyer who's defending him from putting him in jail. So his lawyer who's defending him in the Virginia lawsuit went to see Julian, and they have his information as well. So we have a lot of discovery to take, and we're going to do a very deep dive and learn exactly what the CIA did and what they have.
So because of all this malfeasance and this chicanery and illegal, unconstitutional spying on Julian Assange and his lawyer and other people, do you think that this somehow makes it impossible for the United States government to actually ever get a trial against Julian Assange for any of this? Because isn't it so contaminated now that there's no way Julian Assange could get a fair trial? Is there a judge that would rule that way, you think?
So, yeah, I agree with you. It is very contaminated. What the federal government's going to try to do is they are going to try to, in that case, in the Julian Assange case in Virginia, they're going to make a motion saying that everything that happened in the civil litigation is not relevant here. Whether we did something wrong is not on trial. It's whether Julian did something wrong. But the problem with that argument is that you're right. The well has been poisoned. People read about it. People hear about it. Jurors who are going to be selected are going to presumably know about this. So it's the federal government basically, tails I win, heads you lose. They're going to try their best to exclude all of this from the proceeding in Virginia, and that we're ahead of ourselves. But the federal court judge in Virginia will have to make a decision to see whether any of this stuff can come in that case. Because quite frankly, as we said up front, it's the ultimate irony they want to put him in jail for a long time for doing much less than the federal government did.
And again, most Americans think that Julian Assange is on trial for hacking into the DNC server and colluding with Russia against Hillary Clinton and her campaign to get Donald Trump elected. That, first of all, that didn't happen. There wasn't a hack of the DNC server, and we proved that on the show with NSA whistleblower and top code breaker Bill Binney came on, and he proved to us through data that the information from the DNC was downloaded to a thumb drive. And a lot of people speculate that was Seth Rich, and Seth Rich then gave that to WikiLeaks. And Julian Assange himself has hinted that it was Seth Rich, but without outright saying so. And then Seth Rich was murdered, and we don't know who murdered him still to this day. The cops say the official story is that Seth Rich it's a botched robbery. But it certainly was botched because they didn't take his wallet, they didn't take his watch, they didn't take his cell phone. So it doesn't look like a robbery. And then there was this this propaganda campaign against anybody who asked a question about the Seth Rich murder, that you were some kind of nefarious conspiracy theorist. And I asked on panel to my friend Ben Mankiewicz, from Turner Classic Movie, Cenk Uygur, the head of the Young Turks, the #1 online news show at the time in America. And I said, hey, can anybody remember the last time a journalist wasn't allowed to ask questions about an unsolved murder? And no, they couldn't. And so that hasn't happened before. It hasn't happened since. But only during that time, you weren't supposed to ask questions about an unsolved murder. And the reason they gave was that it would hurt the family's feelings
to solve the
murder of their son. That doesn't make any sense. And also, nobody seemed to care about the Kennedy's family when they showed John F. Kennedy's head being blown off ad nauseum since the time I was born till now. Nobody ever said, hey, that's going to hurt their family. Stop showing the president of the United States' head being blown off. So that idea that just asking questions about the Seth Rich murder, and now it comes out that the FBI doesn't. First, they lied and said they didn't have his laptop.
That's a conspiracy that we have.
It was a conspiracy that the FBI had his laptop. Turns out they did have his laptop. Then they said they couldn't get the data. Then they said they did have the data, but they're not going to release it for 65 years.
To protect the family.
I guess to protect the family.
Well, I think you said it best up front. There's misinformation out there. Julian Assange will be tried because he will be extradited. There's a proceeding on, I think it's January 19th and 20th and 21st. He will presumably be tried for receiving information and publishing it. And I think what's happening now in both in this country and in the world is that there's an awakening certainly by investigative reporters. There was an article, as you may know, in 5 major newspapers in the world wrote an article saying that this shouldn't happen. Congress is now looking into it. It's a travesty that he's sitting in Belmarsh prison in London, and that he had to be in the Ecuadorian embassy for 6 years. He's been in the prison for another several, based on the fact that he's a reporter and nothing other than a reporter. And our hope is that once this information comes out, and once people start scratching their head and say, wait a minute, he didn't hack? He didn't do any of the things they're saying? Then why is he sitting in jail? It's nothing short of an outrage that someone who's just asking the questions and getting information, whether it's the Democratic National Convention or from some other source, is sitting there in jail and sitting in an embassy when all he did was nothing different than every reporter is supposed to do. They're trained to do. It's their obligation to do. And that's what's upsetting here.
In fact, so just to put a button on that, he's not being charged or he's not in jail because of anything to do with Russia, to anything to do with the Hillary Clinton campaign or the DNC server, nothing. The reason why he's in jail right now and what they want to charge him with is getting information that revealed American war crimes in Iraq. And So that's they don't want you to know that. They want the establishment, the CIA, and the corporate press that works for them want you to think he's being charged with colluding with Russia. That's why the people have that impression. That is not what this is about whatsoever. This is about him actually receiving information, and Chelsea Manning.
Who's free now?
Who's now free. So,
correct.
And not only did WikiLeaks publish some of this, but he was doing this in conjunction with the New York Times. Also, also published a lot of this information. And under the Obama administration, they came to the conclusion, well, if we prosecute Julian Assange for this, we're going to have to prosecute the New York Times too, because they did the same thing. And that's why they said we're not going to prosecute him. But they still kept him in that Ecuadorian embassy. And then when they put him, and then now Joe Biden wants him to be, they're going full steam. So they're, even though Joe Biden was vice president, when their Justice Department reached that decision that we can't prosecute him without prosecuting the New York Times, they flipped that on their head. They don't care. They don't care what it looks like. And they're just going to go forward, right? This is what's happening?
Yeah, I think you're right. There's a couple of things, though, that I have to add. Number one is he hasn't been in the U.S. Once he's in the U.S., I have to assume there'll be much more attention brought to him and brought to what a crazy, it's just crazy he's being tried. He's been indicted on these counts. And the second thing is, and maybe this is just hopeful, Joe Biden, because Julian Assange is such a volatile issue right now, there's going to be no pardon after the next election, no matter who wins. There certainly is pressure on Joe Biden to say, listen, you know what, whether he wins or loses, Julian Assange should not be prosecuted for this crime. But right now, it's full speed ahead. They're trying to they will extradite him. It'll go in front of Virginia, and that's when hopefully the real word will come out. Unfortunately, now, like you said, there's misinformation about what he's done and what he's been accused of. And the New York Times, my God, that's what they make their money on, getting this information. That's what they, remember, you and I back in the day, we didn't look at our phone to learn the news. We waited till the next morning. And that's what the New York Times was dying. The Pentagon Papers, they were dying for this information. It's no different than one of the New York Times reporters got if you recall, before the 2016 election, got part of Donald Trump's tax returns. That was published, Maggie Haberman. You published that stuff because your job as a reporter is not to hold it back. It's transparency. It's let the world know. And how can someone be prosecuted for just fulfilling his job? That's what's upsetting here.
So again, another unbelievable irony is that a few years ago, there was a movie about the Pentagon Papers and Daniel Ellsberg, and Meryl Streep was in it. I think Tom Hanks was also in it. And it was all about how Daniel Ellsberg got a hold of the information that revealed that we were being lied to through 4 different administrations about the Vietnam War. And it got published in the Washington Post. And when you would see, I would watch interviews with the whole cast. They'd have the whole cast and the director. Didn't Spielberg direct it? I can't remember. It doesn't matter who directed it, but they were all sitting on stage, and not one honest answer about Julian Assange. Even if someone asked them, they would go, "Oh, that's different," and they would. So they're there at the exact same thing. Their whole movie is about, and how brave the Washington Post was to publish, and how brave Daniel Ellsberg was. And then these actors and writers, directors and producers all just sat there and were cowards when it came to...
Well, the CIA is good now.
Yeah, now the CIA is good.
That's
because
back when they were bad.
Yeah.
We got it all cleaned up.
Yeah. That, to me, that was, and I knew some of those actors personally, and I couldn't believe that they would go along with it. But of course, now I can. Of course, you can't go against Hollywood in anything, and or else you don't get to work. I mean, look at Susan Sarandon. So anyway, I just wanted to share this also. Glenn Greenwald reminded us that one of the decade's biggest journalistic frauds is The Guardian trumpeting that Paul Manafort, which was a campaign manager for Donald Trump, had visited Julian Assange in the embassy several times. It was a total lie. We knew that embassy was fully surveilled, and The Guardian won't retract that story to this day.
Was that to smear Julian Assange that Paul Manafort visited him?
Yes. So that was the smear, because that was the show that he was in collusion with Donald Trump and the Russian.
Now I don't care about Iraq crimes.
So that was, and not only did The Guardian, but here was at the time, the #1 online news show reported that same story breathlessly. Now, in that same studio, I debunked it. They came on after I debunked this Guardian story
And
as
rebunked
garbage, and they rebunked it. And they said, this is what they said.
Well, obviously, it's hard to tell who's telling the truth here.
Julian Assange or the CIA and the Guardian. Not hard to tell. Wasn't hard for me to tell, but here we go.
Nuance, Jimmy.
Very nuanced.
Bestiality.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, it's hard to tell who's telling the truth here. But lately, I have to confess that WikiLeaks has not had an astounding record. The way that Assange seems to be backing Donald Trump over and over and over again, it makes me very seriously question Assange's efforts to actually be a journalist and not to be a partisan. And I get it. I get why he hates the Democrats. They're trying to put him in prison. Okay,
right, but
at the same time,
but still, make sure they win.
But but also make sure they win. And while he's saying this, it's the Republicans who are trying to put him in prison, or trying to kill him. Actually,
they're saying Manafort. Why wouldn't he go with the people if Manafort really were going? Don't go with the people that are trying to free you, supposedly.
Right.
Which is also a lie.
Go ahead. You want to say something?
Ask yourself 2 questions. One is, if that thumb drive that WikiLeaks got of the Democrat of the DNC emails, if that went to the New York Times, you don't think the New York Times would have printed it?
Of course.
And I'll tell you something else. And if they had a Republican thumb drive, they would have printed it too.
That's right.
There's no bias to the Democrats. The whole thing is so outrageous, and it really, it speaks to our whole communications problem with this fake news out there. I mean, people are just saying what they want to hear, what they want to say, what they want people to hear. And it's just, it's working its way now into this It's a different conversation, but it's working its way into this presidential election. At the end of the day, Julian Assange did nothing other than be an investigative reporter. And for that, he should not be tried. He cannot be convicted.
Well, let me just finish this short clip. And
so let's be clear about that.
And now the Republicans are too, and they have been in the past. But it seems like Assange has picked a side. And look, it makes me question his reporting, and so that's the situation we're in now. So now, is he just leaking things that he gets, and no matter what? In which case, I would respect that, or is he selectively leaking based on his political motives? Now that suspicion is out there and it's real and it's possible, I'm concerned that it can't be trusted.
This fat idiot.
So the person who can't be trusted is this guy who had just taken $20 million from the DNC donors to lie and smear Julian Assange for doing actual journalism. And to him pretend that he doesn't know what he's doing is the biggest lie. And that's why his audience is abandoned. That's why I say they used to be the largest online news show. They have a bunch of fake subscribers. And it looks like he's got a $5,000 or $10,000 watch he's wearing, but and I'm guessing that came right from Jeffrey Katzenberg and that money. And by the way, they haven't retracted this video. They won't take it down, just like the Guardian won't take down that bogus article. And so that's them being the enemy of the people. That's them being paid liars to lie to you about journalists. So the thing that they accused Trump of doing, of being the enemy of journalists and free speech, they're actually doing it, right? So that at the time, the #1 news show in the world won't do, and they won't retract it. And they want everybody to memory hole it and forget it happened. But I'm not going to let them do that. So.
But the good news when it comes back to Julian is that, assuming that it goes forward, it probably will, there will be a trial. The government has a burden. It's not going to be tapes like this. It'll be real evidence. And there should be a groundswell of support for a reporter who reported information he received. And if he is tried and if he is acquitted, that it's a terrible waste of 10 years of his life.
Yes.
But it's terrible. I mean, what he's going through. But that should be the end result.
Well, hopefully he's alive. Hopefully that what they're really doing is torturing him And I bet their fingers are crossed that he dies. And the reason why they're doing this, even though there's no way they would win a court case against him, the reason why they're doing this is as an example to anybody else out there who wants to go against the security state, anybody else who wants to go against the CIA, the United States war machine, and the CIA, anybody who wants to go against those people. Julian Assange is your example. That's what's going to happen to you. And that's why we have situations where no one would tell the truth about Syria in the news. No one would tell the truth about Ukraine. Nobody would tell the truth about Ukraine. The only guy who did, his name was Tucker Carlson, and he got fired. And I have to remind people, they don't fire you from corporate news for lying. That's why they hire you. They fire you if you ever tell a truth you're not supposed to. And of course, Tucker Carlson told the truth about the Ukraine war, and that was a bridge too far, and they couldn't stand that, and that's why they fired him. Go ahead.
Now the New York Times will never print anything like a Pentagon Papers ever again. They won't even print just stuff that, I mean, think of the whole pandemic of stuff that they won't, that's a conspiracy. So that's successful. New York Times, that would be on the hook if Julian Assange were on trial for what he did with, that information. That's a warning to them. They're never going to do anything like that again if they help it. They already ran all those people out that would talk about real things.
Right. So all the people who would say something, like Chris Hedges, Seymour Hersh, they're all got fired. They got run out of the New York Times, the Washington Post. Which
it stifles the First Amendment. I mean, this country is founded on that very basic principle. And when you put Julian Assange out there and say, listen, you do what he did, we're going to go after you too, it's terrible. I mean, it just contravenes everything we learned in our whole life about the country and the freedom of speech and how you should be able to say what you want to say. And investigative report journalism, there's a lot of troublesome repercussions from the conduct of the government.
Well, Richard Roth, lead attorney representing lawyers and journalists who had filed suit against the CIA and Mike Pompeo, we wish you all the luck, and I hope you come back and tell us about your victories.
Thank you so much. Anytime. Thank you for having me.
Okay, let's go to a break and we'll be right back with Alex Jones.
Hey, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there for more AM Joy and the rest of MSNBC. And click on any of the videos right here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. And you can get more videos from MSNBC for free every day with our newsletter. Just visit